The Lighthouse Keeper's Letter, Author's Note. Before we begin, let me offer a small disclaimer. Some, or perhaps all, of the tale you're about to hear may be woven from threads of imagination. Yet somewhere within these words, a glimmer of truth may shine, if only for those who care to look. As you listen, I invite you to relax, let the weight of the day drift away, and allow yourself to find calm in the rhythm of the story. And should sleep find you before the end, know that I, as the storyteller, would consider it an honor. If you wake with a curiosity about how it all unfolds, you might return another time to hear the rest, or perhaps just a little more of this tale. Now, let us journey to a quiet seaside town, where the waves whisper their secrets, and a lighthouse stands sentinel against the night. The waves lapped gently against the rocky shoreline, their rhythmic hush and pull a lullaby as old as time. Beyond the golden sands perched on a cliff edge, the lighthouse stood like a steadfast guardian, its light sweeping across the night sky in slow, deliberate arcs. In the warm, cozy confines of her seaside cottage, Evelyn stood by the window, gazing at the lighthouse beam. It was her second evening here, a spontaneous escape from the noise and chaos of city life. The cottage, with its weathered shutters and sun-faded walls, felt like it belonged to another time, one where the world turned a little slower and people paused to listen to the sea. On the small writing desk near the window, she had discovered an old drawer with a slightly sticky handle. It creaked open reluctantly that morning, revealing a bundle of letters tied with a faded blue ribbon. Curious, she had untied the knot, her fingers brushing the edges of the fragile paper. The first letter she read was addressed simply, "To the Dreamer." Evelyn had hesitated at first, unsure if opening the letters felt like prying into someone else's world. But the title, "To the Dreamer," felt like an invitation, as though the letter had been waiting patiently for someone like her. Settling into the cushioned armchair by the window, she unfolded the delicate paper. The handwriting was elegant, though slightly uneven, as if the writer had been jotting down their thoughts in the dim light of a flickering lamp. To the Dreamer. There is a quiet beauty in the sea at night, is there not? The way it seems to stretch into forever, reflecting the stars like a mirror of the heavens. I sit here in the glow of the lighthouse and wonder if you, too, are gazing at the waves, imagining stories hidden within their depths. Perhaps, like me, you seek solace in the rhythm of the tides, the constancy of the light that sweeps across the darkness. If that is so, then we are not so different, you and I. I write these words not knowing if they will ever find another soul. Yet I write them still, because the act of writing feels like tossing a pebble into the ocean, trusting the ripples to carry it onward. Evelyn paused, her eyes lingering on the final line. There was something deeply comforting in the thought, as though the writer had reached through time to share a moment of understanding with her. She glanced back toward the lighthouse. Its beam cut through the night in a steady rhythm, and for a moment she imagined the writer sitting in its warm glow, pen in hand, gazing out at the same ocean that now stretched before her. That afternoon, curiosity drew Evelyn out of the cottage and up the winding path that led to the lighthouse. The salty breeze played with her hair as seagulls wheeled lazily overhead. When she reached the base of the tall, weathered structure, she noticed a wooden sign that read, "Lighthouse tours by appointment only." But the door was ajar, and from within came the faint sound of humming. Evelyn hesitated, then gently knocked. "Come in," a voice called, warm and welcoming. Inside the lighthouse was a treasure trove of nautical relics, old maps, brass instruments, and framed photographs of ships long forgotten. At the center stood a man, perhaps in his late 30s, with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes. He wore a thick cable-knit sweater, as though he belonged to the very sea itself. "Welcome," he said, setting down a book. "I wasn't expecting visitors today. Are you here to see the light? Evelyn smiled. Partly, but I'm also curious about the letters. I found a bundle in the cottage I'm staying at, and I think they might have been written by someone who once worked here. The keeper's expression softened. Ah, the letters. You must be staying at the old caretaker's cottage. Those letters are a bit of a local legend. The keeper gestured toward a small table near the window, where two mismatched chairs sat as though waiting for a conversation to begin. Please, have a seat. I'll make us some tea. It's a story best told with a warm cup in hand. Evelyn took the offered chair, her eyes drawn to the view through the lighthouse's thick glass. The ocean stretched endlessly, its surface shimmering like liquid silver under the late afternoon light. The room was filled with a comforting mix of scents, salt air, aged wood, and the faint floral hint of the tea the keeper was now steeping. I'm Michael, by the way, he said, setting a steaming mug in front of her. Evelyn, she replied with a smile, cradling the warm ceramic between her hands. Michael sat across from her, his eyes briefly wandering to the lighthouse's massive lens overhead. The letters, he began, were written by a keeper named Thomas Byrne nearly a century ago. He served here for decades, during a time when the lighthouse was entirely manual. He had to keep the light burning through storms and fog, often with little more than oil lamps and sheer determination. Evelyn nodded, imagining the solitude of such a life. But why did he write them? And to whom? Michael's lips curved into a thoughtful smile. That's the mystery. Thomas was known to be a bit of a dreamer himself. Some say he wrote to a woman he met only briefly. Others believe he wrote to no one in particular, simply to the idea of connection. What's clear is that he poured his heart into those letters, weaving poetry and reflections on life by the sea. They were never mailed, just tucked away in the cottage. Evelyn tilted her head, intrigued. So you've read them too? Michael nodded. I have. They're part of what drew me here in the first place. I took over as keeper about 5 years ago, and those letters, well, let's just say they have a way of finding the right reader at the right time. That night, back at the cottage, Evelyn couldn't resist returning to the bundle of letters. She lit a candle on the writing desk, its soft glow flickering across the room, and carefully unfolded another page. To the wanderer, do you ever wonder about the journeys that bring us to the places we're meant to be? The paths we take, the turns we miss, the storms that steer us off course, yet somehow we find ourselves where we belong. I often think of the lighthouse in that way, standing firm against the tides and tempests, its light a constant in an ever-changing world. Perhaps in some small way, we are all like the lighthouse, searching for the courage to guide others while finding our own way through the dark. Evelyn traced the words with her fingertips, feeling an unspoken connection to the writer. It was as if Thomas Byrne had written these letters for anyone who might need them, anyone who found themselves adrift and searching. The following evening, Evelyn returned to the lighthouse. This time, she brought one of the letters with her. I thought you might like to see this, she said, holding it out to Michael. He took the paper carefully, his eyes scanning the familiar words. This one was always my favorite, he said softly. Thomas had a way of turning even the smallest thought into something meaningful. He believed there was beauty in everything, if only we paused long enough to see it. Evelyn met his gaze, a quiet understanding passing between them. I think he's right, she said. As the days passed, Evelyn and Michael found themselves drawn together, their conversations flowing as easily as the tides. They shared stories of their lives, their dreams, and the quiet moments that had brought them to this remote corner of the world. And with each passing evening, the lighthouse seemed to stand not just as a beacon for ships, but as a symbol of the connections they were forming, steady, unwavering, and full of light. Over the next few days, Evelyn and Michael fell into a quiet rhythm. Mornings were her time to paint the sea, its moods shifting endlessly between soft blues and stormy greys. By afternoon, she often found herself at the lighthouse, carrying another letter to share. Michael greeted her each time with a warm smile and a fresh pot of tea, the letters sparking conversations that felt as timeless as the ocean stretching before them. One evening, Evelyn brought a letter marked "To the one who watches." Michael read aloud, his voice steady yet tinged with awe. To the one who watches. There is a profound solitude in watching the world unfold from this perch above the sea. I see the gulls circle, the waves rise and fall, the stars wheel in silent procession. And yet, even in this solitude, I do not feel alone. I wonder if somewhere there is someone who also watches, someone who feels the quiet ache of the tides and the gentle pull of the moon. If so, perhaps we are connected, not by sight or sound, but by the unspoken knowing of kindred souls. If you are there, I hope you feel the same comfort I do. For in the watching there is a quiet kind of love, a love for the world as it is, and for those who see it with wonder. Michael set the letter down, his fingers lingering on the edge of the fragile paper. Thomas had a gift, didn't he? He managed to capture feelings most of us can barely name. Evelyn nodded. It's as if he saw the world not just with his eyes, but with his heart. And somehow his words make me feel seen. Do you ever feel that way? Michael's gaze softened. I do, especially lately. The admission hung between them, delicate as sea mist. That night, Evelyn lingered at the lighthouse longer than usual, the fading sunlight painting the horizon in hues of amber and rose. Michael leaned against the rail, his gaze fixed on the distant waves. You know, he said, breaking the companionable silence, I've always believed Thomas wrote those letters not for anyone in particular, but for everyone, as if he knew they'd outlast him, waiting for the right people to find them. Evelyn tilted her head, studying him. And do you think they found the right people now? Michael turned to her, his eyes catching the last light of the setting sun. I do. Later, back in her cottage, Evelyn unfolded another letter, this one written in a slightly firmer hand. Its title made her breath catch. To the Seeker of Light. To the Seeker of Light, you who journey toward the beacon may not realize the light you carry within yourself. It shines quietly, unnoticed perhaps even by you, yet it has the power to illuminate the lives of those you meet. Do not doubt the strength of this light, nor the ways it may guide you, even when the path seems uncertain. For it is in seeking the light that we find our truest selves, and in sharing it that we become whole. Evelyn held the letter close, its words echoing in her mind as she drifted to sleep. The next afternoon, Evelyn returned to the lighthouse, her steps light but purposeful. She brought the letter with her, and as Michael read it, she found herself watching him, noticing the way his expression shifted, how the words seemed to reach him as deeply as they had reached her. You know, she said softly, I think Thomas was right about the light we carry within ourselves. And maybe it's meant to be shared, not just through letters, but through the moments we give to each other. Michael looked up, a quiet smile spreading across his face. Maybe that's what this place has always been about. The light, the connection. Evelyn smiled back, feeling a warmth that went deeper than the sun on her skin or the tea in her hands. The days passed with an easy flow, each one marked by quiet conversations, shared letters, and the steady rhythm of the lighthouse's beams sweeping across the ocean. The sea was always there, constant and ever-changing, much like the bond that was slowly growing between Evelyn and Michael. One afternoon, as Evelyn arrived at the lighthouse, Michael was perched on the railing, looking out over the water. She approached him, her heart beating just a little faster than usual. You seem deep in thought today, she remarked. Michael turned to her, a slight frown creasing his forehead. I was just thinking about all those letters, and how they seemed to have a way of finding their way to the right people, like they'd been waiting for us somehow. Evelyn smiled softly, stepping closer. Maybe they're meant to show us something we've been missing, or maybe just to remind us of what's always been there. He met her gaze, the weight of unspoken words hanging between them. There was something about the way the light from the setting sun caught his eyes, a softness that made Evelyn's chest tighten with something gentle but undeniable. Thomas wrote these letters about connection, Michael said, his voice low and thoughtful. But maybe he was also writing about us, about finding each other. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat, and for a moment, the world outside the lighthouse seemed to fall away. That evening, as the lighthouse cast its steady light across the sea, Evelyn sat at the writing desk, the letters scattered before her. The soft, flickering candlelight seemed to make the words glow with a warmth that had nothing to do with the flame. She picked up the next letter, eager to continue reading. It was addressed to the keeper of my heart. To the keeper of my heart. You who tend to the light that guides the lost and weary may not realize how much your care shapes the world around you. You believe in the strength of your lighthouse, but it is the strength of your heart that makes it stand tall. It is your heart, steady and kind, that provides more than just light. It offers refuge, a place to rest, and a promise that no matter how dark the night may seem, the light will always return. So I write this, not as a farewell, but as a reminder. The light you give, the warmth you share, never goes unnoticed. It shines, quietly but steadily, even when you do not see it. It is, after all, the very essence of who you are, and I hope you find it, just as I have found it in you. Evelyn's hand trembled slightly as she set the letter down, her mind racing. The words felt like they had been written for her, or perhaps for Michael. To the keeper of my heart. It was a sentiment she wasn't sure how to express, but somehow in that moment she felt it more deeply than she had ever felt anything before. She knew, without a doubt, that this journey, this escape from the noise of her previous life, had led her here, to this very place, to Michael. That night, as they sat together in the lighthouse, the wind howling softly outside, Michael broke the silence. You've been reading the letters more than I have lately, he said, his voice light but with a depth of meaning that sent a flutter through Evelyn's chest. She glanced at him, feeling the quiet connection between them. I think they're trying to tell us something. Michael smiled, his eyes catching the light in a way that made Evelyn's heart swell. I think they're trying to remind us of something we already knew. He reached for her hand, his touch warm and steady. You've brought something into my life, Evelyn, something I didn't know I was missing. Her voice was barely a whisper. What is that? He leaned closer, his forehead resting gently against hers. The light. Evelyn's heart fluttered in her chest, and for a long moment they simply stood there, sharing the quiet between them. The light from the lighthouse illuminated the room, casting soft shadows that seemed to dance in rhythm with their hearts. Days turned into weeks, and their connection deepened further. The letters, once mysterious and cryptic, now felt like a shared language between them. They read each one together, sometimes aloud, sometimes in silence, allowing the words to wrap around them like a soft blanket. And in the quiet moments when the sun set and the ocean whispered below, Evelyn found herself feeling more at peace than she had ever been. Michael was no longer just the keeper of the lighthouse. He was the keeper of her heart, as she was of his. One evening, as the sky painted itself in hues of lavender and rose, Evelyn stood beside the lighthouse, looking out at the horizon. Michael joined her, his presence warm beside her. You know, she said softly, I think Thomas had it right. The light we carry within us, it's never meant to be kept in the dark. It's meant to shine. Michael nodded, his hand gently resting on hers. I think we're both finding that out. Together, They watched as the light from the lighthouse swept across the waves, steady and unwavering. And in that moment, Evelyn knew that she had found what she had come to this place for, not just the peace of the sea, but the connection she had longed for all along. The letters had led her here, but the light, their light, was what would guide them forward. As the last rays of the setting sun kissed the horizon, Evelyn and Michael stood together, side by side, in the soft glow of the lighthouse's steady beam. The sound of the waves crashing against the rocks below was a gentle lullaby, soothing and timeless. The world seemed to fall away, leaving only the two of them, a quiet connection forged by time, space, and a few carefully written letters. In that moment, Evelyn felt as though she had found exactly what she had been searching for: peace, belonging, and a love that didn't need words, but simply existed in the shared silence between them. Michael's presence beside her was more than enough. The lighthouse's light swept across the water again, steady and unwavering, a symbol of something enduring, something that would continue, even after the night settled in. "You know," Michael said softly, his voice low but full of meaning, "I think Thomas would have been pleased to see us here." Evelyn smiled, her hand resting in his, feeling the warmth between them. "I think he would have." And as they stood there, watching the darkening sky and the endless waves stretching into the night, the future remained as vast and mysterious as the ocean before them, filled with infinite possibilities, yet entirely theirs to explore whenever they chose to. But for now, in this quiet moment, there was no need to look ahead. Everything they needed was here, in the light of the lighthouse and the peace they had found in each other. The sound of the waves, the whisper of the wind, and the steady glow of the lighthouse were the only things left to fill the space as the night unfolded around them. And so, the story of the lighthouse keeper's letters gently drifts into the night, leaving you to carry it in your heart, allowing your imagination to fill in the spaces, imagining the love that could unfold, just as it has in so many quiet corners of the world.